It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back on the hometown commander. You're back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on my quest to out-brew the magic world. We are starting our last official week of Lost Caverns of Ixalan content. We're doing Merfolk this week. We've got a couple Merfolk decks this week. One new commander and two old for you. And I'm excited that Merfolk are back. Kamena is a card that I always liked, but I could never find make a way to the deck to work the way I wanted to. And as soon as I read Hakbal, I knew this was going to be a deck for me. I could kind of ramp the power level down a little bit, make it be just a fun, casual deck I wanted. I think this deck is going to hit above its weight class. I think it's a good deck, and I think we packed the right things, type of protections and things in here to keep it hitting above its weight class. But at the end of the day, this is a +1/+1 counters deck and exploring, and we're going to have a ton of fun with it. Hakbal of Surging Souls, a 4-mana 3/3 Merfolk Scout. This is the beginning of combat on your turn. Each Merfolk you control explores. Every single Merfolk you control explores, whether they have haste or not, whether they're going to attack or not. All of them explore. And one of the best ways we can take advantage of this ability is if we flip the top card of our library on our first Explorer and it's a card we really like, we can just keep it on top and every creature is going to get a +1/+1 counter after that. And that's pretty great because then we can take advantage of buffing our board. Now, what I expect to happen is the first time, within the first one or two flips, it's probably going to be a land. The land goes to your hand, of course, when you explore, and we don't get the +1/+1 counter. But then again, the extra lands in our hand aren't a bad thing. It just ramps us for future turns. And then if Hakbal manages to swing, it says whenever it attacks, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield if you don't draw a card. So I like that because then when we attack, we can dump one of those lands that we got off the Explorer. If not, we just draw the card we really liked, right, off those Explorers off the top. So, yes, Hakbal is going to require us to go wide, which is what we want to do. We want to go wide in this deck. And there's a lot of really great Merfolk that are going to help us do this. I'm going to try my best in this deck tech, since this is built off the Precon, to talk about the cards that are going to push us towards our what we want from the deck and how we're going to kind of win, and try to leave all of the other really cool Merfolk for you to explore on your own. But let's talk about how we're going to build our Merfolk army. How are we going to go wide? Well, we got a card recently in Emperor Mihail II that says whenever we cast a Merfolk spell, we can pay 1. If we do, we make a 1/1 Merfolk creature token. And we have a couple cards that do this, and these are the cards that we really want to take advantage of because every single Merfolk we control explores, which means we're going to take advantage of all of those little tokens getting up. Right, getting bigger and bigger as well. And then we have a pair of enchantments that do something very similar. Deeper Pilgrimage says whenever one or more non-token Merfolk we control become tapped, we make a 1/1 token. And then Deeproot Water says whenever we cast a Merfolk spell, we make a 1/1 token with hexproof. So again, these are some of the cards that are going to help us start putting these 1/1 Merfolk down onto the battlefield, and then they're going to be able to explore on their own. I've tried to pick a good range of mana value in Merfolk, especially a couple that can't be blocked. And I think they're important because we do have other Merfolk that we're going to talk about in a second that give us our Merfolk flying or the ability to be unblocked. But I think just Merfolk that can't be blocked in general are still going to be good. We're playing Mist Cloaked Herald, River Sneak. I believe those are the only two that I have that straight up can't be blocked on their own. And then, like I said, later we'll talk about the ones that have evasion that we get given through other creatures. Okay, so we're building our Merfolk army. We're playing our ones. We're going wide. How do we take advantage of the Explorer? Well, our Signpost uncommon from the set, Nikenzil Current Conductor, is a pretty cool card. Whenever a creature we control explores a land card, we can put it from our hand on the battlefield tap. This is some nice natural ramp, and it's going to make the explorers where we hit a land a little bit less hurtful, right? That we're not just blindly adding cards to our hand. And then whenever a creature we control explores a non-land card, we put a counter on Nikenzil. And this is great because this is going to make Nikenzil bigger and make it a bigger threat for our opponents to deal with. Now, part of what we'll talk about in a second is giving our creatures trample, which means Nikenzil is just going to become a harder and harder threat for opponents to deal with. A card we're going to talk about a lot, and we've talked about a lot in this Ixalan season, and I believe every tribal deck is going to talk about going forward, is Roaming Throne. And this is a card that at at minimum is going to make Hakbal's trigger go off twice every combat because it is a triggered ability, and then every other ability that our merfolk have is just going to go off again. And this is great because that's going to help our entire deck do what we want it to do, take advantage of things, and continue to push our strategy forward by doubling our triggered abilities. Mainly Hakbal's ability, but the rest of them, if their triggered abilities get doubled as well. And there's some important triggered abilities in the deck. Okay, Topography Tracker is probably one of the cards you're going to see pretty quickly that's mentioned here. When it comes in, we get a map. A map is an artifact that just lets us explore for 1 mana and sacrificing it and tapping it. But its big ability says if a creature we control would explore, instead it explores, then it explores again. Technically, there is a scenario where if Topography Tracker and Roaming Throne are out, we would explore 4 times with Hakbal out. And that's Magical Christmas Land. But again, Topography Tracker, even with Hakbal out, now we're exploring twice, and now we're adding counters to our board even more, and we're making our creatures bigger and bigger. It isn't a merfolk, but it was a card that was paired with the merfolk when they were in standard, and I think it's going to help us a ton, and that's Wildgrowth Walker. It says whenever a creature we control explores, we put a +1/+1 counter on it, and we gain 3 life. Yes, life gain will only do us so much, but again, this just makes Wildgrowth Walker a massive threat because no, it doesn't explore with Hakbal, right? Because it's not a merfolk, but it's going to get massive, and we're going to gain a ton of life. And I think what this is going to allow us to do is be a little bit more aggressive attacking, and make the only thing we really have to worry about be commander damage hitting back at us. Okay, so the last card is a card from the set, Twists and Turns. I think looks kind of interesting. This wasn't in the precon, but it makes sense to come in. Whenever a creature we control would explore, instead we scry 1, then that creature explores. I like this because then we can know exactly what's on the top of our library before we start exploring, and we can take better advantage of it that way, bottom that card if we don't, or leave it on top and get all of the counters we want. When it comes in, target creature we control explores, which is pretty cool. We get one for 1 mana right when we put it down. And then whenever a land comes in, if we control 7 or more lands, it flips over and comes into just a cave that taps for a green. But it says you can look at the top 4 cards of your library, reveal a creature from among them, put it into your hand, and just allows us to get more merfolk into our hand. But again, we really want to keep this on the front side for as long as we can, just to make sure that we can see what that first card is before we start our Explorer train. But again, we don't mind when it goes over to the backside because it just becomes another land. Okay, well, we've got our merfolk out. We're pushing towards a scenario where we start getting counters on our creatures and we start doing big things. But I think the one thing we need to mention before we talk about pushing towards the win is how do we protect our creatures? I think the one thing you're going to see more often than not when you look at people playing this deck online is they're going to get this big board state and someone's going to board wipe. So I've tried to put as much as I can realistically in to protect our creatures. Heroic Intervention comes in to give our permanents hexproof and indestructible. Again, won't stop a bounce board wipe or an exile board wipe, but it will stop a straight destruction board wipe. Inspiring Call, draw a card for each creature we control a +1/+1 counter on it, then those creatures gain indestructible on the turn. And that's going to be great because then, again, get around that destruction. And then the one that will protect us from exile board wipes is Ripples of Potential. Since we proliferate, then we choose any number of permanents that had a counter put on them this way, those permanents phase out. Ripples of Potential seems like the best of the 3 because I guess other than the scenario where somebody blocks our entire board and we want to keep them alive, Ripples of Potential is going to save us from a lot of destruction and a lot of exile board wipes, cyclonic rift, things like that, and could be the reason we may just end a game by protecting our whole board and then coming back to our turn and and winning the game outright. But okay, let's talk about how we're going to push towards the win. One of my favorite merfolk that I've used another +1/+1 counters deck, but it's great here because it fits the tribe, is Herald of Secret Streams. Creatures you control, the +1/+1 counter on them cannot be blocked. This card will help us end games. As soon as our creatures can't be blocked, we have no problem being aggressive and attacking with them. My only advice, when you start getting to the point where our creatures have flying or can't be blocked, you have to be careful with who you're attacking and take your opponents out in the order that you need to take them out. Make sure that you're taking your threats out and you're being smart with who you're attacking. At the end of the day, we're going to end this game via combat if we're going to win, so we need to be careful with how we do that and we're picking the right order. Mist Dancer gives all of our merfolk +1/+0 flying. This is pseudo-unblockable. Obviously, if we're playing our opponents that have flyers, then of course they can block. But again, our hope is they're going to be so big with the exploring that even if they have blockers, I mean, the goal would be to get our merfolk above that 6/6 threshold if we're playing against angels, maybe above that 7/7 threshold if we're playing against demons or dragons, and then we're going to be basically unblockable in the air because our opponents are going to lose what they had for that. And the last one is Zagana Utopian Speaker. When it comes in, if we control another creature with a +1/+1 counter, we draw a card. But the last ability says each creature you control the +1/+1 counter on it has trample. So we're playing this, we're playing the Garruk's Uprising. We're just trying to play some ways to give our creatures trample so that way if we can't get any evasion, we can just run through people on the ground. Wanderwine Prophets is an old merfolk from Lorwyn that's pretty darn fun. And when it comes in, we champion a merfolk. So when it comes into play, we sacrifice it unless we remove another merfolk you control from the game. When this leaves play, that card returns to play. I think we'll almost always have a token or something like that lying around to use for this, or a small creature. Again, if we exile a token with this ability, the token won't come back, but that's fine. Wanderwine says, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we may sacrifice a merfolk. If we do, we take an extra turn after this one. We will probably end up having enough creatures to make this more than worth it. And in fact, if we can get a Deeper Waters or a Deeper Pilgrimage out, we will always have enough merfolk to end the game with this card. Again, keep by combat, continuing to hit in, get one of those Trampler neighbors down, and just run over our opponents that way. I like Wanderwine Prophets. It's a little expensive at $9 at the moment, but again, it makes sense because it's just going to help you straight up end the game, right? As soon as we take more than one turn with this giant board attacking with creatures, you're going to understand that is going to spell problems for our opponents. We have two pretty cool one-sided board wipes in our, or should be one-sided board wipes in our deck that are going to help out. Raise the Palisade. We choose Merfolk, return all non-Merfolk creatures to their opponent's hands. This should hopefully clear the way for a big attack. Wave Goodbye, return each creature without a +1/+1 counter on it to its opponent's hand, to its owner's hand. Again, this should hopefully bounce all of our creatures back, or opponent's creatures back to their hand. Yes, though, with Wave Goodbye, there is the awkward chance where maybe a creature we own that doesn't have a +1/+1 counter just came in this turn, and that will go back to our hand. But I think it's a small price to pay. We could always just do this before. We could always just do this before we play that creature. And try to avoid that. And then the third is something like Filter Out. This is maybe instead of something like Cyclonic Rift, the Filter Out says return on non-creature, non-land permanents to their owner's hands. And again, we could just bounce all our artifacts and enchantments back to people's hands. This could stop. This is mainly in here to stop our artifact and enchantment type deck friends from, getting some of that pressure off of us and allowing us to try to push through for that big attack at the end. We talked about the Garruk's Uprising for trample, and then we have Simic Ascendancy. Whenever we put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, we put that many growth counters on. Simic Ascendancy, at the start of our turn, it has 20 or more growth counters, we win the game. Simic Ascendancy shouldn't be very hard to win with, especially in this deck, if we can get it set up. And it could be a way for us to, again, just threaten to hopefully win the game at that point. And then I'm trying out Quest for Renewal as a way to just give all of our boards pseudo-vigilance. So whenever a creature we control becomes tapped, we put a counter on it. If there's 4 or more counters, we untap all creatures we control during each other player's untap step. Quest for Renewal actually works really well with Kumena, who we're playing as an alternate commander in the deck. Of course, him being tapping our merfolk to do different shenanigans. So, of course, if we can see Kumena and Quest for Renewal at the same time, that will help us as well. And Kumena still helps putting counters on all of our creatures, giving... drawing us cards, doing those kind of things. It's still helpful. I just wanted to focus on that +1/+1 counters that we give out with Hakbal. Okay. I've said it before on the channel. I'll say it again. We're brewing version 1.0 deck lists, right? So there's going to be cards that we miss and we can't fit into the 100 that we really like. And so I want to talk about just 3 or 4 cards that I really like that didn't make my list that I think deserve potentially a look at a slot. The first is Sentinel of the Nameless City. This card looks really cool. Whenever it comes in or attacks, we create a map token. It's a 3/4 for 3 with Vigilance. This feels like a great body on its own. And as soon as you get a couple counters on this thing's pretty cool. And then it makes those map tokens, which allow you to explore again at another time. I like it. I think it's probably worth running. I just couldn't find a spot for it in this list, but I think maybe if you notice some other merfolk aren't as good in their slot, it's probably worth coming in. Tadioba seems like it probably would be good. Whenever your land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life and draw a card. We got to be slightly careful with Tadioba depending on if we have Nick and Zill out and we're putting a bunch of land down. We don't want to draw too many cards, but I feel like it's probably a pretty good draw engine. It's probably something we need to consider because it's going to help us draw through our deck even more. Contest of Claws is a card I really love from this set, and I feel like when we have a board of creatures that are going to be really big, Contest of Claws should ideally help us. It says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. If excess damage is dealt this way, we discover X, where X is that excess damage. I feel like there's just going to be a point in the game where this is a 2-mana get rid of a creature and get a free spell off the top. It feels right. Again, I just couldn't find the slot. And then Quicksilver Fountain. Beginning of each player's upkeep, they put a flood counter on target non-island land they control. That land is an island as long as there's a flood counter on it. And it says at end of turn, if all lands and player islands, remove all flood counters. This pairs with both Lord of Atlantis and Master of the Pearl Trident, who give all of our Merfolk Island Walk. I believe there's other ones, but these are the main two I can think of off the top of my head that give all of our Merfolk Island Walk. So Quicksilver Fountain could start putting those flood counters onto our opponent's lands, making them into islands, and then giving us that pseudo-unblockable. The reason I didn't put it in here is I think we have more than enough. We have the flying, we have the unblockability with Herald, we have the trample. I just don't think we need it. I think we've covered it in enough ways, and of course if we're playing any blue decks, we're just going to get the natural island walk that way. So that's the reason why I didn't. Again, I think we have more than enough of it. And I don't think we're going to need it. But if you want to play into it, you have Aquatex Will, you have Quicksilver Fountain that you can throw in for that. But let's get into our playtest. Let's see what we got. Hey, we got a 3-lander. Work our way towards Hakbal. I like it. Turn 1, let's get this Path of Ancestry down in tapped. Turn 2, we can look to get the Master of Pearl Trident down if we want to. We can look to get a Cryptolith Right down, which allows all of our creatures to tap for mana. Turn 2, we get a Neoform, which is a pretty cool card because it allows us to sacrifice a creature and look for a creature that's 1 plus that creature's mana value, and it comes in with a ++1 counter. We have so many Merfolk that are between 2 and 4 mana that Neoform is going to help us trade a creature into something else, trade a 3-mana creature into Herald of the Secret Streams, trade a 4-mana creature into that Mist Diver that gives everything flying. Again, if we know the Merfolk in our deck, I feel like a card like Neoform is going to help us get into those creatures. I'm just going to get the Master of the Pearl down here. Again, Path of Ancestry makes us a blue, put the blue into the Flooded Grove for 2 blue, get the Pearl Trident down there. Turn 3, we draw a Herald of the Secret Streams, which is great. That's going to help us out next turn. I think here we get the Cold Eye Selkie down. It has Island Dock. Whenever it deals damage to a player, we draw that many cards. This is going to be great if we can get Hakbal down next turn, because then we can start dealing damage that way. And hopefully we draw the land next turn for the Hakbal. If we don't, I think we'll probably just maybe put down Kumena and start trying to do it that way. We don't, so I think we just dump down Kumena here. We can always tap our 3 Merfolk on somebody else's turn to draw a card, or we could try to get in with the Selkie to, it would be a +2/+2 with Island Walk. Maybe we would get somebody in here. For the purpose of this, I'm going to assume, well, let's see, when we cast the command and we get to scry 1, we'll Rampant Growth. Rampant Growth would be good, but it makes us miss it. Let's put this on the bottom. I'm going to assume for the purposes of this that we don't have an opponent that we can... Well, we have to have an opponent at this point in the game where we can hit with the Selkie. So let's say we do. We get 2 cards. We get the Secluded Courtyard. Perfect. Now we have a Hakbal next turn. So we'll draw. We'll dump Hakbal down for 4 mana at this point. We get to scry 1 because of the Path of Ancestry. And... we flip Kindred Discovery, which is a great card. It'd be a card I'd be interested in because it's going to help me get through my deck. Do we need another land? Well, no, we have the Herald of Secret Streams. I think we leave it on top because now at the start of our turn, all 4 of these explore. We have the Kindred Discovery on top, which means we just get 4 counters on all of them. And then maybe Selkie can get an attack in. It probably can, again, and now it's a 3/3. Let's just say it does. We draw the 3. Up to 10 cards in hand. I would just say at this point, let's say that we did draw the 4. This is what we have. I like the Forerunner because it could go get Mist Dancer or something like that. But again, we have the Herald of Secret Stream, so I think it would be 1. I like the Inspiration Call for some protection. Rapid Hybrid and Reality Shifter is both removal. I like the Cryptolith. I like this. So I'd say maybe Kindred, the Neoform. And that gets us down to 7. And then we'll just go one more turn. We see the Simic Growth Chamber. I'd say we just dump the Herald of Secret Streams, get the Growth Chamber down, pick up the Forest, again, we scry because we cast a Merfolk, leave the Seafloor Oracle on top. Again, everybody else explores. Now they're unblockable, and we start, again, getting some damage. Cold Eye Selkie might draw some cards, and that would be something probably at this point in the game we'd have to be careful of. But let's go one more round of the Goldfish. Okay, so we've got the banner at turn 2, which is going to reduce all our Merfolk by 1. So I don't hate this hand. Of course, it gets better if we draw land. So let's see, turn 1 we do get an island, so we dump that island down. I've got nothing to do turn 1. Turn 2, I get a forest. I like it. I'd say let's do this and do the banneret. This reduces all of our Merfolk by 1, which is pretty cool. And it has Island Walk if that becomes important. We can dump the Hakbal here, or there's a world where we can... well, we can't dump Lord of Atlantis and the Hexcatcher. We could dump Realm Walker and the Hexcatcher, which I actually don't hate the idea of, since we would want to have those creatures on board for Hakbal to be able to attack. So when it comes in, we're going to choose Merfolk, and then look at the top of our card of our library at any time. Right now we have an Inspiring Call, so we can't cast that. I like the Hexcatcher here for 1 mana. Now it's buffing our whole board up by 1. What I like about Hexcatcher in this deck is it says sacrifice a Merfolk, counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. This is a cool ability because once we start having more Merfolk than we need, we can take advantage and hurt some people's spells. All right, turn 4, I'd say we get Hakbal down for 3. We have 1 mana left. We can play the Skydiver without kicking it, which wouldn't be a bad idea. What's the top card of our library? It's Filter Out. We kind of want that one. I'd say let's do it. Let's put the Skydiver down. We could kick it, because we don't have to kick it, but we can't pay 0 if we kick it. Obviously, to take a 0 mana artifact with it. We'll just put it down. Everything explores here. We saw the card on top. We want to keep the Filter Out on top. Everything explores. Maybe we take a big attack here if we want to. Let's go one more. I like the idea of leaving Inspiring Call up at this point to give our creatures indestructible. What's the top card? It's a Lit Draw Mirror Lake. So we start exploring. The Mirror Lake goes onto our hand. Let's leave the Deep Fathom Echo on top. So let's say 4 of them, other than them, get counters. They make their attacks, and now we just keep the Inspiring Call up to try to protect our board. But let me know what you think of Hakbal down in the comments below. This is a deck I'm very excited to play for myself. I bought the Precon, and I'm in the process of upgrading it. And if you're interested at all in seeing my updates to the deck in the future, let me know in the comments, and I will post them. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.